This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, and welcome once again to The Clash. My name is Jeff Dixon. I'm joined by
Chris Whaley.
And we're taking what is our faith and allowing it to clash into the culture around us. And as we do, we're coming away with a worldview that helps us see the world better and help us live our lives just a little bit better in the culture around us. Now, Chris, today we have a special guest who is a friend of yours that I'm very excited to talk with and hear from. And so why don't you go ahead and introduce him? He's ready to go.
Well, I tell you, I had the great privilege of being in professional wrestling for 10 years. Of course, I was never a star, but this guy was at the top of the ladder. I mean, 8-time world champion. You're talking about a guy that's worked with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and Lex Luger and the Road Warriors and Ivan Koloff, and he's just been with so many places that I only wish that I could have been. And the great thing about this guest is that he is a die-hard, blood-bought, born-again man of God.
There you go.
And he loves Jesus. You'll know this name. We have with us today Nikita Koloff.
Hey,
Nikita, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Clash.
How you doing, Pastor Jeff? Hey, Chris, great to be with you guys. And I love the name, The Clash, because it certainly applies with today's culture. So I can't wait to talk with you guys.
And I got to tell you right in front, Nikita, I have booed you before. I've actually seen you wrestle. I booed you at some point in my life as a wrestling geek growing up here in Florida and going to matches whenever I could and whenever I could, steal away to them. So, I mean, I'm pumped. I'm excited that you're here. So,
well, Jeff, I wear that as a badge of honor. That just means apparently I did my job if you were booing me. So I thank you for that.
When Chris said we were going to talk to you, I said, "What? We're going to talk to who? No way." So,
hey, Jeff, my English has improved as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, much better. I remember it.
Good English tutoring.
You've lost your
That's
accent.
right.
Yeah, lost the accent. Well,
English tutoring.
The great place to begin, of course, we're going to talk about wrestling. We want to talk about your wonderful ministry, Man Camp. But let's start off with your journey of faith. I think you came to know Christ back in, 1992, 93, somewhere around there?
October 17, 1993, at the age of 34. And so I was, I guess what you might call a bit of a late bloomer. Didn't grow up in the church, just like some of your viewers may or may not know. If they don't know, had connected dots here that this guy's the Russian nightmare, wrestled with the Russian bear, but he doesn't sound very Russian, as we're joking. That's because I'll help you out. I'm not from Russia. Actually hail from the great state of Minnesota. And just like I'm not from Russia, Chris, I didn't grow up in church. So I don't necessarily have a church background. That's not to say I wasn't aware of the story. That man Jesus who had spikes driven through his hands and his feet and a spear through his side, who was crucified on a cross and shed his blood. That story had just never made the 18-inch trip from my head down to my heart until 17 October 1993. That was about 11 months after I made an executive decision to walk away from professional wrestling at the age of 33. So that's pretty unusual. I know we'll probably get into some of that, but that's a shorter version, and however deep you want to go, you let me know.
Well, tell me about that. I mean, were you in church, or had somebody been witnessing to you, or you saw somebody's life that made a difference? Or what brought you to that point where you were there and accepted Christ?
that point of decisions. Great question. So I had, again, I didn't grow up in church. That's not to say I never went to a church. I had attended a few times, and if I did, looking back, really for the wrong reason. And there's a whole lot more to that story. We'll let people know before we finish how they can get the full story. But for sake of time today, there's so much more to that story. But I knew the story, but that's as far as it went. It was an intellectual or a head knowledge of the story. Now, I had health clubs back in the 90s. I actually had a Lutheran pastor and his wife who were members of the gym, and they would invite me to their church. And I would occasionally go, but again, wrong reason, wrong motive for why I was going. And then I'd met a Christian couple after I left wrestling. I met a Christian couple through other business ventures. And just enjoy, love getting to know that couple. And it was just a divine appointment for me, Chris. On that day, 17 October, I called up, it was Dick and Charlotte Elston were their names. And I called them up a few days before and said, hey, I'm going to come to your church on Sunday. And they're like, all right, great. We'll meet you there. And they did. And I'd never been to that church before. But looking back, I can see where even walking in, I sensed something different. And when it came time for the invitation, as it's called, or the altar call, it was just an aha moment for me. In fact, I write about this in one of my books that I was successful, but I was unfulfilled. Right? I was, I elated to get the roar of the crowd from all the fans, but at the end of the day, at the end of the night, the cheers stop, and then you got to look for the next thrill or that next thing to fill that void in your heart.
Right.
And that morning when that invitation was given, it was an aha moment. I'm like, I know what's missing. What's missing is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was the first one to the altar, on my knees, confessing, repenting, asking for forgiveness, and inviting Jesus into my heart. And I can say to you and all of your audience that in that moment, that sense of not feeling it really a life of any significance or a sense of being unfulfilled all went away with a single decision in a moment that morning.
Amen. That's wonderful. A few weeks ago we did an episode on heroes, and I just want you to know you're one of my heroes because, when I was in wrestling, I didn't know another Christian, to be honest with you. I mean, my last 3 years I was in Texas. I got to work WCCW and in the dressing room with Freebirds, Von Erichs, and a lot of other guys. And, what took place after the show was over, it was just, things that I didn't want to do because I had a wife and 2 little girls at home. And
right.
You just never heard of Christians. And so now, we got several guys that are born-again believers like you and Lex Luger, and Ted DiBiase, and there's more, I could name them. But I just want you to know you're one of my heroes, man. And thanks for standing strong for the faith and for that ministry that you're going to talk about in a little bit. But I don't want to dominate. I'm going to let Pastor Jeff ask you a question.
I just want to piggyback on what Chris said, but also then kind of just follow up with what you just did. So from the moment then you came to know Christ, there was an immediate change. So what happened then? Tell me about the trajectory of your life after that moment then. I mean, you walked back out into the real world, and what's different?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. And let me just real quick, just say to Chris, while we move on, you mentioned, not having maybe as successful or as illustrious a career as some, but I've watched the movie, Chris. I've read the book. You've got an incredible story of your own. And you made your splash in professional wrestling, but more important is you're making a bigger splash for God's kingdom. And so kudos to you for your time there. Jeff, what transpired following that decision that morning, looking back, was about a 5-year journey of discipleship, meaning I didn't just jump into or launch, Koloff for Christ ministry on day one, or start calling churches or promoting myself to go speak or preach. I delved into discipleship. The doors were open. I was there. The first 3 trips I went on were building projects to get my hands dirty, to learn what it meant to actually serve other people. I went to Trinidad to help build a church. About a few months later, I went to the sister island of Tobago to help build a Bible college. About another 6 months later, I made my first trip to Africa, Angola, Africa, for 3 weeks to help build a church. And then I went on 3 trips with my daughter's youth group to Singapore, Bogota, Colombia, and Moldova, next to my former motherland. Wink, wink. And I just went to serve. And so those first 5 years, from 93 until the fall of 1998, when Koloff for Christ Ministries was officially launched, I just went through a process of discipleship. In fact, my pastor today, Jay Stewart, is still my pastor of nearly 31 years later now. He's still my pastor.
That's awesome.
And we meet on a monthly basis. He's one of my battle buddies, one of my mentors, but we get together. He's one of my accountability partners. Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron. In fact, we'll meet in a couple days, and we do that on a regular basis. And so that's what I did, Jeff, those first 5 years before I ever, really launched out and started preaching and all the rest.
Sure. And I mean, and kudos though. That's so smart, because again, that's the biblical pattern, right? I mean, Paul does that right after his conversion. We don't see Paul for a while in Scripture because he is actually putting some meat on the skeleton of this thing called faith. But you did roll up your sleeves and went to work, and that too is so important because I think I said this past Sunday morning. We spend all of our lives getting ready, getting set, and then going. But for a lot of Christians, we never come out of starting blocks. We never get moving. And so the fact that you figured that out, or you kind of mentored through the process, I mean, that's the way you're supposed to grow. I mean, that's wildly important in our culture today. Most people miss that.
Yep, they do.
It is, and you say a lot of people miss that, and I believe, Jeff, a lot of churches miss that. That when it comes to discipleship, in my view, now, and again, I've only been walking with the Lord for a little over 30 years. In fact, I got a spiritual birthday coming up here in a couple days from this interview. But the bottom line is, in my estimation and in meeting people, and look, I've stopped counting. I've preached in over 1,300 churches so far, but I just stopped counting. I've preached I've been to now 36 different countries, all 50 states, 28 different denominations I've ministered in, conferences, camps, and everything else. And the thing lacking the most that I see is discipleship. It's one thing to get somebody to an altar or get them to make that decision to surrender their heart to Jesus, but then what? That's like if I have a newborn baby and I leave it to fend for itself, the survival rate's not real high. I got to feed that baby, change that baby's diaper, take care, comfort it when it's crying, when he or she's crying, right? And a babe in Christ, as the Bible says, a newborn Christ follower should have that very same care.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to have to take a break here and come back in just a moment. And when we come back, we're going to hear hopefully some good wrestling stories, but also about man camp. So don't go away. Come right back with us.
Hey, it's me again, and I just wanted to take a moment and invite you to check something out. It doesn't cost you a dime, but I think that it's something you might really enjoy. The Church at 434, where I'm the pastor, where Chris Whaley is on staff, we have an app, and that app is absolutely free. You can find it by going to the App Store for iPhones. Just type in the Church at 434, or go to Google Play for Android phones. Again, the Church at 434. And when you get there, you're going to find a number of resources that are designed just for you to encourage you in your spiritual growth, in your walk with Christ. There's going to be some things that will entertain you, that you'll laugh at, that will be fun. And you can also tap in and watch our worship services. You can see some of the films that we've made. You can see some of the activities that we've got. And you can connect to the ministry of the Church of 434, where Chris and I are a part of that on a weekly basis. And we would love for you to join us and become a part of that network with us. And so check out the Church at 434 app in the App Store or in Google Play, and you can visit with us there. Also, you can email us right through that app, and we'd love to hear from you. Just say, hey, I got the app, and I like it. If you get the app and you don't like it, we don't want to hear from you. But that's a whole different thing. Let's get back to the Clash. Welcome back to the Clash. We're having a great time here, Nikita. Thanks for not leaving. I mean, it's been a bad show if we'd come back and you're gone. So I appreciate you being here.
I'm here.
Okay. Now, as I told you when we came on, I booed you a number of times because you did what you did so well. Got to tell us, how did this character develop? Where did the idea come from?
So, growing up as a kid, wrestling wasn't on my radar. I was passionate about bodybuilding, weightlifting, football, and a vision I had for my life was eventually, having a pro football career and then coaching and then sailing off into the sunset. Of course, God had other plans, but wrestling was on the radar, I should say. But through a 5-minute phone call, sight unseen, with a promoter named Jim Crockett Jr. in Charlotte, North Carolina, I showed up the day he said to be there, made sure he understood I had no amateur background, no professional training. He said he was okay with that, just said, be in my office on such and such a day with your head shaved bald. I said, that's it? He said, that's it. I said, I'll see you then. I had an address and a phone number and a date. Wow. And so I loaded up my car a couple months later, drove to a city I'd never been, Jeff, walked in and introduced myself. Nikita Koloff's born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, I didn't come up with the storyline of a nephew for Ivan Koloff. That was Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle. They get the credit for that. Okay. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and was able to carry it off. And so my career was launched the next night in the Dorton Arena in Raleigh. Fast forward 13 months later, I'm the world tag champion, world 6-man champion, and wrestling a guy named Ric Flair for the world heavyweight champion at the first ever Great American Bash. And that's the condensed version of how that story launched.
Well, as you were, I mean, obviously, you're going to be the bad guy from Russia,
right?
I mean, how crazy did it get some nights?
Yeah, and wrestling was different. So the perspective from fans, there's certain fans who still had their apprehension as to whether it was real or wasn't real. There were some who 100% bought into that it was 100% real. And so Ivan and I would experience that, everything from legit death threats to Crockett's office, that if the Koloffs show up in Charleston tonight, we're going to kill him, and he's like, we'll just beef up security, you're fine. And 6 different times. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, I'm 285 pounds at the time, and 8% body fat, and 10 foot tall and bulletproof, so I wasn't scared of anybody.
And they're going to beef up security with somebody they're paying minimum wage, right? Is that
exactly. Gotcha. So, and one other caveat to that, 6 different times I had fans come over the railing, try to get in the ring and get me. In fact, that match I referenced, the Great American Bash in 1985 against Ric Flair, for those who go back and watch that, you'll literally see a fan come in the ring. That dude was not part of the show, for the record.
Okay.
He was the first of 6. He's the only one that got his hands on me, but he was the first of 6 that came after me. Wow. And outside the ring, I was fine. I think I had everybody scared enough. But they got enough bottles of courage in them, they were willing to come over the railing and try and come after me.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. All right, real quickly, because we want to get to man camp, but tell us, I think I know the answer to this, but what's the greatest match you ever had?
It's hard, Chris, to nail it down. And I'll say, I usually answer it this way. Certainly that first match against the Nature Boy Ric Flair, only 13 months into the business, in front of 30-something, however many thousand people, certainly was a highlight. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. The very first ever war game in Atlanta, right? The Road Warriors, the Superpowers, Paul Ellering against the Four Horsemen and J.J. Dillon, was certainly a highlight. And probably the most often I hear about from wrestling fans was the best of seven series against Magatie for the U.S. heavyweight title. I just kind of mentioned those three all in that same realm.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, I came to know about Man Camp. I was at an event with you a few years ago, and that was the first I heard of it. But I certainly got excited about it and have told a lot of people about it, hoping you get, some of those people coming to Man Camp. So tell us how Man Camp got started. Tell us what it's about, and let us know what we can do to help.
Yeah, well, it just continue to spread the word. It's just grassroots, it's just word of mouth. But God put men and men's ministry. I guess because just kind of that big rugged guy, right? So I can gain some level of respect from other guys. And I went to my first camp in South Texas. Teasing you about Texas. I went to my first camp in South Texas in March of '06. Now I'm 13 years into my walk with Jesus. But God just radically did something in me at that camp when I saw a teaching on biblical manhood and had never understood the role of a man in society until I saw that teaching from God's perspective. I understood it from the world's perspective, but not God's perspective. And I was so greatly impacted. If you fast forward from that camp on that day, I've now been a part of camps and men's ministry for what, going on 18 or over 18 years, and I have facilitated and organized over 80 of these camps, including the one Lex Luger. You mentioned that name earlier. When Lex Luger got radically saved in April of 2006, God reunited us together in June of '06, and we launched this camp in a little town in Georgia called Man Camp. And what we do is we bring small groups of men together. We try to limit it to 15, 20, maybe 25 guys max. We've had guys from over 25 different states. We've had a guy from Europe. We had our first guy from Canada last spring. We do it every spring and fall in Georgia. And our goal, guys, is to sow into men over the course of a few days, give them tools for their tool belt, or tools in their toolbox to go back home and be that godly man, godly husband, godly father, godly grandfather that God desires them to be. And if you go on the website, you're going to see testimonies of guys who have had miraculous transformations physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, hearts that have been healed, marriages that have been restored, relationships between fathers and sons. And so that's how the camp really came about. And I tie in. I think what you probably came to, Chris, was a Man Up conference. So the Lord has put me in a position to be able to do these Man Up conferences, Man Up dinners. Next year I'll launch Man Up breakfast. I got a Man Up radio show and a podcast, and all of it centers around being a godly man, and that's what we do.
And it is a definite need in the Christian culture. It's not in our culture overall, but especially the Christian culture, because I came through an era where women did everything at church. My background as a Southern Baptist, I had female teachers along the way, and the ones that made the biggest impact were that every once in a while when you had a male teacher, right? It's like, there's a guy in here. And for a boy growing up, that was huge. Yeah. That was huge.
Right.
And to be able to grow a generation of men, multiple generations of men, into this biblical manhood, that's a big deal. So that's awesome.
It is a big deal. And I just want to encourage people. I know we're probably close to being out of time. Let me encourage people with a couple things. Yeah. One, obviously we're just touching the surface of my life story. So Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption, is my newly updated life story. And last year I went in the studio, actually did it on audio in my own voice. Nice. Wanted people to hear my passion and my voice for my life story. That's Ring of Redemption. And that's got the full story. And then, a project that I was happy to work on was Wrestling with Success, Developing a Championship Mentality. This book is motivational. The other one's inspirational. And then if people want to learn more about Man Camp Koloff for Christ Ministries. Connect with me on social media. Link to the Man Up podcast. All of that can be done in one place. That's Koloff, last name Koloff, KOLOFF.net. One stop. You can get the books there, personally autographed, etc., etc., etc. So, man, I appreciate you guys being on, having me on the Clash.
Yeah.
Well, we're very grateful to have you. And what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I just want to say my only disappointment is, though, that when, it came time to who was the toughest match, you didn't just say, well, if I had the opportunity, it would have been against the Masked Saint. I mean, that would have gone down as the all-time great match. But
well, hey, after reading his book and watching his movie, the little vigilante in him, I don't know that I would have wanted to step
he's
in
scary,
the ring.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
How'd you like this guy to be your pastor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty crazy stuff. So
I was just
Yeah. I would have been watching my back, walking down every street and every alley.
no doubt.
I was just a religious redneck, That was it. Hey, God bless you,
so
man.
much.
Thank you so much, and that's Koloff.net.
Just simply Koloff.net.
Okay.
Go there, link to everything, see everything that we talked about today, and more.
Good deal. Well,
Thank you so much.
We need to do it again sometime. So
Thank you,
let's stay in
guys.
touch,
God bless you.
God
Thank
bless
you.
Okay, take care. Yeah, that was fun. We need to go to man camp.
I was just thinking the same thing. Why don't we do that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking to myself as he's talking, I'm like, that'd be fun to go to. Take a bunch of guys.
How important is men's ministry?
It's huge. It's
It is huge.
I mean,
There's a lot of wimpy guys today.
There are. I mean, and the role of men in the lives of their children, but in their in relationship with their wife, but then also in the church. I mean, that kind of leadership. I mean, it is so important.
Yeah.
And in some ways, so missing.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world that's tried to redefine what manhood's supposed to look like, and
Right.
we kind of lost sight of what we're supposed to be.
Well, I'm so thankful for the children's ministry that we have at the church at 434. And we have a guy that's leading that.
Yeah. No,
And I think that is so awesome because Scott does an awesome job.
does.
But as you were talking to Nikita, talking about your childhood, and that was just like mine. I mean, when my mom got saved and started taking me to church, I had all women teachers except for this one guy. And that's the one I remember the most.
And I remember the men who taught me as a child coming up through Sunday school.
Yeah.
One of them's here.
Yeah. Really?
To this
Who?
day, Tommy Pylant.
Really?
Yeah, he was one of my Sunday school teachers as a kid growing up. And so here he is today, sitting on the board here at the church that we're at. I mean, again, those relationships really become very strong, and they really are very formative. So,
Right.
so I mean, for our audience out there, I mean, if you're a guy watching this thing, our advice to you is man up. And if you're a lady who husband might not want to watch this show with you, tell him to man up. And then if you're just a female viewer who just loves the Clash, we understand that because you're here to see the hat. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, and so we're just thrilled that you're here, Chris. This has been fun.
It has.
It's been good, and so we're very blessed to have these people that just keep wanting to talk to us. So I think at some point they're going to say, we're done.
I don't think so. But it's been great.
It's been fun.
And can I say one last thing?
Say one last thing.
Don't tap out.